Good. Welcome, good students. This time around is one of the longest text anthology in IGCSE English Language M, and it's The Night by Alice Munro. I've divided this work into various categories, but this time around we're going to skip the introductory part of it, that is the background, but go straight to The Night. And what do we expect in The Night? Now, our task 1 that is going to be, first of all, the connotations. We need to understand the title. What are some of the linked ideas suggested or associated with a word, or and to be particular, the night in this context? Now, what are the connotations of the word night? Start by the definition of the connotation, something suggested or associated with a word or a thing. In this text, good students, you've read it, I know. You'll be able to write down for what reasons one might not be able to sleep at night. Write down for what reasons one might not be able to sleep at night. This is a hint. Usually the night comes with uncertainties. It's not clear, worry, anxiety, tension, fear. Those could be the reasons as one might not be able to sleep at night. Good. Welcome, good. Context. Here is the tip. There are no marks in the exam awarded for the contextual knowledge. Only use the context to help further your understanding of the text and the intentions of the writer. Alice Munro, born in Canada in 1931. In 2013, at the age of 82, Munro was awarded the 2013 Nobel Peace Prize. Oh, not Peace Prize. It is Nobel Prize in Literature. The Nobel Prize is awarded for a writer's entire body of work, not just one book, and is a fantastic achievement. The Nobel judges called her the master of the contemporary short story. She is judged to have revolutionized the architecture of short story, exploring difficult issues in an uncomplicated prose style. It is a semi-autobiographical writing, to be precise, semi-autobiographical writing. Alice Munro has always been known for reworking personal material in her stories. On numerous occasions, she openly admitted to adapting some of her real experiences into her fiction. Yet, at the same time, she declared that her writing remains fictional, not autobiographical. Munro employs narrative techniques to create the impression of authenticity and autobiography in her stories, which are worth exploring in our analysis. Canada in World War II. Canada entered in the 1939 to 1945 war on 10th September 1939. Food was being sent overseas to help feed the soldiers who were stationed there. That meant that there were shortages of certain food, such as butter, back in Canada, and they had to be rationed so that each person received a fixed amount every week. And this puts us into the immediate context of the events that Munro tries to share with us. Context. So therefore, when reading, as you will be reading this text, as you read, respond to the following questions. These are some of the questions that you need to keep in mind. From what perspective is the story written? What is the setting? And good students, in the previous videos, I have elaborated well of what the setting comprises of. You might as well want to go back to the videos. What important background information is provided? And who are the characters? Is there anything in the story that stands out to you? How do you feel about the ending? Good. Why do you think the short story rather, is called The Night? Why do you think the short story is called The Night? Now, as you are thinking, here are a couple of suggestions. The night. The night usually comes with uncertainties. It comes with terror, fear, and some phobia. Or especially when you are struggling with, let's say, for example, a certain problem. Literally, the night is connotated with the fear, worry, anxiety, state of tension, and as those couple of ideas will suggest what we shall be looking at, or possibly what we exactly were expected, or what we expect from this particular short story by the title The Night. Good. So, from which narrative perspective is this short story written? From which narrative perspective is the short story written? Now, good students, this is one of the techniques that writers do employ whenever they want to share their thoughts and feelings, and especially when they are narrating their own past or experience as to maybe the events that they went, the experience that they went through. You'll find that such kind of texts are characterized by the use of personal pronouns I. You'll see possessive pronouns like my, me, our in plural, that is, us, and therefore, and supporting evidence from the text would look like, for example, especially in this case, I've patched some of them here. You'd see in the first text we have, so I did not ask and wasn't told and can only suppose. So we have, so I did not ask, wasn't told. Another one is we weren't. We, you look at the use of first pronoun we. And we weren't accustomed to giving such greetings in our family. I don't remember. It was all inward, these uselessness and strangeness that I felt. The thought that I could strangle my sister, and of course, the narration in this particular text is in the first person singular and plural as per to this particular slide here. We will be looking at the benefits, or the effects rather, the effects and of the use of the first person narrative. When writers use or deploy this particular aspect in their narrative, what effect does it have to the readers? Now, sometimes when someone, or when you, for example, want to communicate your feelings from within, what is going on with you, you'd have to deploy, you're most likely to share with your audience or your listeners your stories, but then it means that you are sharing deeply, at personal level rather, and therefore for you to share at personal level, you need to embrace the use of the first person perspective. Otherwise, whatever that you're sharing would sound impersonal, and you don't want to be impersonal. And again, it also allows the readers, to be in your shoes. They end up reacting. You provoke some emotion, you trigger emotional response to your experience, and therefore the major effect of why writers would, and of several reasons rather, they use or they deploy the use or they embrace the use of first person perspective is that it's either they're sharing their thoughts and feelings, and this one allows us to know exactly or roughly what's going on with them, and it makes us also empathize or sympathize with their situation as we are speaking rather. And therefore, in this particular text, The Night, Munro shares her thoughts and experiences, and again, we kind of like we react to whatever that she was going through. We also need to look at how tone is used in the text, therefore describing the tone. Now, a couple of lines here that will trigger your thinking. So, I did not ask. So is highlighted. And another one is now. I have to describe. Another highlighted phrase there is now. Now, so and now are termed as discourse markers. Discourse markers in a text, they usually chronologically put the text or the events in their order of occurrence, chronologically rather. What that means is that the writers would want to share, especially in this context here, the writer is sharing her thoughts and feelings as to what she went through. And by the use of so, it suggests that the writer has listed a series of events, and maybe the pros or the good part of it when the terms were favoring and when they are not favoring, and therefore, as part to the statement suggested there that so I did not ask, she did not bother, and maybe it was a non-issue to the ones who were supposed to be concerned, but to her, therefore, if the others are not bothering, therefore, it should not bother her to ask. Okay, hopefully that you read the text, you'd agree with this particular phrase right up here. Now, I have to describe. Of course, it is a seminal, or you can maybe extract a lot of information, and therefore it means that therefore it is in the past. Now she has, of course, to describe a series of arrangements in terms of maybe coping up with her situation. Now she had to describe. Now the tone in this particular case is conversational. It sounds more conversational. Alice Munro tries to have a conversational tone, like as if she is having a talk with his or her audience, rather, in this particular context. And therefore, good students, maybe you might want to literally in your own short notes, you describe the tone of Munro's writing. How does the use of discourse markers affect the tone? So here is a quick go through the describing tone. So I did not ask, and now I have to describe. The conversational tone adds to the autobiographical feel of the short story, as the informal language mirrors how one might recount the past to a friend. It also makes the narrator seem surprisingly nonchalant at times when they reveal information that might otherwise seem distressing. And this is it. Although the short story is fictional, what is the effect of Munro using an autobiographical style in her writing? We saw this one. Autobiographical refers to the use of first-person perspective, like in this context, so I did, now I have. Quickly, let's go through the exposition. So a quick reminder here. The exposition of a story is the opening part in which the audience is introduced to the characters and their situation, and commonly the setting. I'll go through some couple of lines, maybe the first and second paragraph there. When I was young, there seemed to be never childbirth, or a burst appendix, or any other drastic physical event that did not occur simultaneously with a snowstorm. The roads would be closed, there was no question of digging out a car anyway, and some horses had to be hitched up to make their way into town to the hospital. It was just lucky that there were horses still around. In the normal course of events, they would have been given up, but the war and the gas rationing had changed all that, at least for the time being. When the pain in my side struck, therefore, it had to do so at about 11 o'clock at night, and a blizzard had to be blowing, and since we were not stabling any horses at the moment, the neighbor's team had to be brought into action to take me to the hospital. A trip of no more than a mile and a half, but an adventure at all the same. The doctor was waiting, and to nobody's surprise, he prepared to take out my appendix. So I lay minus my appendix for some days, looking out a hospital window at the snow, sifting in a somber way through some evergreens. I don't suppose it ever crossed my head to wonder how my father was going to pay for these distinction. I think he sold a woodlot that he had kept when he disposed of his father's farm. He would have hoped to use it for trapping or sugaring, or perhaps he felt an unmentionable nostalgia. So, how is the setting and the context immediately established? Here are a couple of things that you need really to be looking at. How is the setting and context? So, around what time period is the narrative told? And of course, at night. What type of environment is it set in? City, suburbs, countryside? You can feel that on yourself. What are the weather conditions like, and how does this contribute to the mood of the short story? What is the financial situation of the narrator's family? Now, from a couple of lines that we've read there, you're able to, answer these couple of questions. And of course, by the end of this particular video, good students, you're following, I'll also, leave you a link that you can reach me through. Questions like this one, you can send them through a link that I will patch by the end of the lesson, and then for grading. Relationships and parenting. Good students, can you find the following techniques in the extract? What do they reveal about the narrator's relationship with her mother? Now, the first one is the use of indirect speech, non-specific nouns, one sentence, paragraph, and metaphor. I'll go through the text quickly. So, all these particular techniques are supposed to be identified or be picked or, identified in this particular part of the text, the narration. Then I went back to school and enjoyed being excused from physical training for longer than necessary. And one Saturday morning, when my mother and I were alone in the kitchen, she told me that my appendix had been taken out in the hospital, just as I thought. But it was not the only thing removed. The doctor had seen fit to take it out while he was at it. But the main thing that concerned him was a growth. A growth, my mother said, the size of a turkey's egg. Good students, right there. Anadiplosis, and I paraphrase it, was a growth, my mother said. Now, anadiplosis is, in this context, the last word at a previous sentence is a beginning word at the next sentence. A growth and a growth. But don't worry, she said, it's all over now. Now, that is the use of one sentence paragraph. The thought of cancer never entered my head, and she never mentioned it. I don't think there could be such a revelation today without some kind of question, some probing about whether it was or it wasn't. Cancerous or benign, we'd want to know at once. The only way I can explain our failure to speak of it was that there must have been a cloud around that word. So, I did not ask and wasn't told and can only suppose it was benign, or was most skillfully got rid of. For here I am today, and so little do I think of it that all through my life, when called upon to list my surgeries, I automatically say, all right, only appendix. So, still under relationship, parenting, the narrator's father is very nonchalant. In response to her confession, how is this tone created in the extract? Quick reminder, nonchalant is a feeling or appearing casually calm and relaxed, not disturbed, not displaying any anxiety, interest, or enthusiasm about anything. And let's read the text. He said, well, it sounds relaxed. The father is nonchalant at this particular point. Then he said, not to worry. He said, people have those kinds of thoughts sometimes. He said this quite seriously and without any sort of alarm or jumpy surprise. So the father is not jumpy in this particular context, even as much as the girl thinks that all these should surprise him. People have these kinds of thoughts or fears, if you like, but there are no real worry about it. No more than a dream, you could say. He did not say specifically that I was in no danger of doing such a thing. He seemed more to be taking it for granted that such a thing could not happen. an effect of the ether, he said. Ether they gave you in the hospital. No more sense than a dream. It could not happen. In the way that a meteor could not hit our house. Of course it could, but the likelihood of it doing so put it in the category of couldn't. He did not blame me, though, for thinking of it. Did not wonder at me, was what he said. Now, this is found between lines 25 to 29 and lines 230 to 233. Good students, if you have your text with you. And how does Munro reflect on the changes in parenting styles? Munro is very critical of her parents. And we can say this one by giving the evidence from the text. Now, very critical how? And here I quote, he did not blame me, that's the father. So she thought that the father would blame her for the kind of things that she told him. He did not blame me, though rather for thinking of it. Did not wonder at me, was what he said. Still under relationships, no parenting, but relationships, sisterhood. Good students, it's important not to oversimplify the narrator's relationship with her sister based on partial evidence. You're supposed to look on both sides, love and hate. Find quotes that reflect both a laughing and an unsettled relationship between the sisters. In this case, the upper part of a broken love symbol shows the unsettled relationship between the sisters, and the lower part, of course, a loving one. Now, under the unsettled part of relationship between these sisters, one, these are the brainstorm, spit, to spit, enraging, suffocation, teasing, top bunk, threaten, her own friends, her own games, tormenting. Those particular brainstorm expressions out there are the words that good students will help you to see the unsettled relationship between the sisters. And on the other end, we have I loved more than anybody in the world, storyteller, counselor. We would swing in the hammock, suggesting the love that exhibited between the two sisters. Still under relationships, she felt as an outsider. Here is a quote from the text. It seems that the mysterious turkey egg must have given me some invalid status so that I could spend part of the time wondering about like a visitor. Now, from this particular quote from the text, and which words or phrases in this quote depicted the narrator as an outsider? Of course, mysterious, invalid status, wandering, and like a visitor. These are a couple of words you ask students. They will suggest that she felt like, she's left out. And in a big house where she was supposed to have compassion, from the family members, sympathy, and all the encouragement, she felt like, a visitor or an outsider in this context. Physical health. I quote an expression from the text, but the main thing that concerned him was growth. A growth, my mother said, the size of a turkey's egg. Again, but the main thing that concerned him was a growth. A growth rather, my mother said, the size of a turkey's egg. Now, there is an adiplausis, the use of an adiplausis. When a word at the end of a sentence or a clause is repeated at the beginning of the next sentence or a clause, that's when we say it's an adiplausis. And of course, what effect does the use of an adiplausis have in this quote? Repetition with an adiplausis has the potential to increase the power of persuasion and create a sense of urgency with an obvious cause and effect. It also offers a stylistic strength to your listeners and readers with the soothing rhythm and cadence. So, good students, the effect that an adiplausis has to the readers is that it increases, it persuades us more, and also it creates a sense of urgency that this is the thing, and makes the text or makes the idea or the point to stand out. Still under physical health, is the main thing that concerned him was a growth. A growth, my mother said, the size of a turkey's egg. Now, good students, what are the connotations of the word growth? Why is it effective to know that the relative size of the growth? Did this revelation have much of an impact on the narrator? These are a couple of questions that students you need to relate to as you're reading the text. Yes, I do agree that the growth, it's very effective to know that the relative size of the growth, it was stubborn, it was worrying. And since it was the main thing that the writer wants to share with us, it had a revelation of much of an impact to the narrator. Mental health. You might think this was a liberation. At first, perhaps it was. The freedom, the strangeness, but as my failure to fall asleep prolonged itself, and as it finally took hold altogether until it changed into the dawn, I became more and more disturbed by it. I started saying rhymes, then real poetry, first to make myself go under, but then hardly of my own volition. The activity seemed to mock me. I was mocking myself, as the words turned into absurdity, into the silliest random speech. I was not myself. I had been hearing that said of people now and then all my life without thinking what it could mean. So who do you think you are then? I had been hearing that too without attaching to it any real manners, just taking it as a sort of routine jeering. Think again. Now, good students, that is a text. Okay, that is an extract from the same text, rather, where we're going to be looking at a couple of techniques that have been deployed there. And I would want that, or I would prefer that maybe you challenge yourself. And of course, I'm going to leave a link by the end of the video where you can reach me through. And in that link, identify this particular use of techniques by picking again the evidence from the part that I've extracted. How are the following techniques employed to indicate a growing mental instability in the narrator? That is the use of a technique, parallel sentence structure, repetition, internal monologue, passive voice, simple sentence, one sentence paragraphs, language choice, and the use of rhetorical questions. Now, all these, again, I'm going to explain shortly, but before I spoon feed you, I'd like you also to give in your contribution. And it's from the extracts. You don't have to read the whole text, but from the extract that I've patched here. And this indicates or brings out her mental health, the growing mental instability. Still under mental health. Now, Munro does build up a shocking confession, but she does that one by a number of ways. One, she uses ambiguous language. And of course, good students, ambiguous language is in between line 90 and 114. In between, we can find the use of ambiguous language and what, of course, is the effect on the reader. We are also going to be looking into that. And also the structure and how is suspense created. Suspense is also created there, of course. This creates a shocking conversion. Tension is created. So Munro creates this particular aspect, and by the use of this particular yellow part here that I'm reading, the structure, and how is that created. And also, how does the language and personification depicted the narrator's losing control? Now, the narrator's loss of control is done by or enhanced in the text by the personification aspect. Now, good students, we're going to go through the text briefly, and we see where these particular three aspects have been depicted. And of course, as usual, you can also pause and read it by yourself. Try to do this thing by yourself before you get help. But here we go. By this time, it wasn't sleep that I was after. I knew mere sleep wasn't likely, maybe not even desirable. Something was taking hold of me, and it was my business, my hope, to fight it off. I had the sense to do that, but only barely, as it seemed. Whatever it was trying to tell me to do things, not exactly for any reason, but just to see if such acts were possible. It was informing me that motives were not necessary. Very, very much ambiguous. It is it's disorderly. We cannot really grasp a thing. Look at this. It wasn't sleep I was after. Mere sleep wasn't likely. Maybe not even desirable. Unambiguous language. Line 95. It was only necessary to give in. How strange. Not out of revenge or for any normal reason, but just because you had thought of something. Still, again, the use of structure there. And I think I did think of it. The more I chased the thought away, personification. Now, right there, good students. The more I chased the thought away, the more it came back. No vengeance, no hatred. As I have said, no reason except something like an utterly cold deep thought that was hardly an urging, more of a contemplation, could take possession of me. I must not even think of it, but I did think of it. Ambiguous. The thought that the thought was there and hanging in my mind. Personification. Structuring, you see there's the use of short sentences there. There's a paragraph, a two-sentence paragraph, and also a one-sentence paragraph. Structuring. The thought that I could strangle my little sister who was asleep in the bunk below me and whom I loved more than anybody in the world. She's contradicting herself. The use of the juxtaposition. You know, like I could strangle my little sister who was asleep in the bunk below and whom I loved more than anybody in the world. How can you strangle someone that you loved? So there is an aspect of juxtaposition placed there, strangle versus love very much. And that really creates a shocking conversion of Munro. Still under mental health, a continuation. Of course, there were no streetlights. We were too far from town. Everything was larger. The trees around the house were always called by their names. The beech tree, the elm tree, the oak tree, the maples, always spoken of it in the plural and not differentiated because they clung together. Now, they were all intensely black. So were the white lilac tree, no longer with its blooms, and the purple lilac tree, always called lilac trees, not bushes because they had grown too big. Now, by the end of this one, how is darkness used as a symbol here? Just an insight. Darkness is symbolizes fear, tension, worry, confusion, lost, scared. What does the narrator's description of everything being larger and the trees clung together reveal about her mental state? What does the narrator's description of everything being larger and the trees clung together reveal about her mental state? Now, she saw that her world was not really small, it was so big, and given the fact that she had a growth, yeah, and there is an emphasis, there is emphasis which is put on the growth. It reveals about her mental state that something was not right. She was gradually getting out of control, or she was losing the sense of herself. Yeah, and therefore it reveals that is also why the writer is describing all these, that not that they were so big, they're always big, the oak trees are big and the marbles is compared to her. But again, for her being out there, it also suggests that she is in her own world. She's contemplating, she's far away. Mental health. Strangle her, I said then. That's a phrase. I could not stop myself after all. Now, how far can this line be considered a turning point? Review Munro's mental state before and after this line. Is there change? Of course. The climax is the turning point of the story, the point to which the rising action has been building, and the point at which the characters have what they need to resolve the conflict. And then we start going down. Final reflections. Now, from line 237, the narrator begins to use direct address, you, and seems to take on a more reflective tone. Why do you think Munro chooses to end her short story in this manner? Now, first of all, just an insight. When writers are using direct address using you, now here number one is that they sound more personal, and at the same time they're addressing the readers directly. They want to engage their readers. Each and every time that you see the use of direct address like you, the writers are in this context maybe wanting to, or they want to engage their readers uh, personally, and it sounds more personal than when the writers are using first person pronoun I or we in plural. Paper 2 practice exam style question. How does the writer present the theme of mental illness in Night? In your answer, you should write about how the narrative of the story is presented, the relationships between the narrator and the family, and the use of language and structure. You should support your answer with close reference to the extract, including brief quotations. For a starter, read the student response to a practice exam questions on Night. By referencing the mark scheme, explain which level you think this candidate is working. But of course, you don't have to do that. Now, let's get to these students' response. Munro depicts the narrator as experiencing a type of existential angst that seems to be sparked by a lack of routine and purpose. The removal of household chores, as an example, makes her feel like a visitor in her own home. The simile suggests the absence of responsibility, which has affected her self-identity and creates a sense of uselessness and strangeness. This shift in her self-worth is emphasized by the simple sentence stating, "I was not myself," causing her to question, "Who do you think you are then?" The internal dialogue indicates the narrator is losing grips with the very essence of who she is, and the imperative "think again" highlights her desperation in rediscovering her identity. Okay, now here is a clear version of it. The student example paragraph as part of the exam style question that you saw earlier. Now, we go. Munro depicts the narrator as experiencing a type of existential angst that seems to be sparked by a lack of routine and purpose. The removal of household chores rather, as an example, makes her feel like a visitor in her own home. The simile suggests the absence of the responsibility has affected her self-identity and creates a sense of uselessness and strangeness. This shift in her self-worth is emphasized by the simple sentence stating, "I was not myself," causing her to question, "Who do you think you are then?" The internal dialogue indicates the narrator is losing grips with the very essence of who she is, and the imperative "think again" highlights her desperation in rediscovering her identity. Planning your answer, your response. Now, first of all, after you've read the exam style prompt, existential angst is simile, like a visitor, lack of belonging, altered identity, and a feeling of strangeness. Now, existential angst is a feeling of anxiety or anguish. It is generally held to be a negative feeling arising from the experience of human freedom and responsibility. It's a feeling of anxiety, in fact, or anguish. This is what the writer Alice Munro felt. Now, who do you think you are then? It's an internal dialogue, mental insecurity, imperative, think again, desperation. How does the writer explore the theme of mental illness? Now, I've highlighted how the use of a simile up there, and the use of internal dialogue, imperative, the use of imperative language, and a simile like a visitor, lack of belonging, altered identity, and also strangeness. Plan your answer by thinking about the topic sentences you will use for each paragraph. we've already planned existential angst. There is a CML up there. You're going to be using the red part of it that I've highlighted by the red. Plan your answer by thinking about the topic sentence you'll use for each paragraph. Make notes under each topic sentence of the evidence that you'll use and analyze. Good students, I'd like you to maybe use these as a blueprint and come up with your own. And again, as I said earlier in the previous slides, that this I'm going to patch a link, and through that link you can reach me through. You can send me your analyzed or your work for grading, and then I can send you through the same platform. Writing an introduction and conclusion. Introduction: give a one-sentence overview of what this short story is about. Introduce the main ideas you'll explore in your response. Now, and the conclusion: bring your ideas together to consider what the overall intention of the writer is and what is the bigger message. Now, key to note: it is not a necessity to write an introduction and a conclusion for this answer. However, an introduction can help organize your ideas, and a conclusion can encourage you to consider the overall intention of the writer or the overall message of the story. Not necessary, but in most cases it's good. It's good, however, to have that kind of an introduction. Structuring your paragraphs. How do you do it successfully? While there is of course no way to structure a paragraph, here is a recommendation to help you fulfill the math scheme. Now, point, evidence, analysis, cross-reference, and then an explanation finally. Answer the question directly. Evidence: support your answer with a quote. Again, answer the question directly. Do not think of superior words. No. Analysis: identify language, structural techniques used and their effect. Link back to your point. Cross-reference: find a second example that supports your point and link it. Explain: identify language and structure techniques used and their effect. Link back to the point. When you're explaining, you're identifying them, and of course, keyword there is their effect. And of course, this is directly to you. These are the examiner's tips that they usually use. Directly answer the question in each paragraph. Keep linking back to your point. 2, ensure that you take quotes from the whole extract, not just a particular section, to demonstrate a thorough knowledge of the text. 3, ensure you explore how both language and structure are used by the writer, although you do not need to reference language and structure equally. You see, look, language and structure are the same. You cannot reference to them equally because structure are totally different and language is different. If you have identified maybe a couple of language techniques and a couple of structure equally, you cannot reference to them equally. They're different. I mean, the referencing is different, the way you do with the language and structure. And of course, I'm going to have a video elaborating or trying to explain on how to reference language and structure when you are compelled by an exam prompt. Finally, good students, hand in your response. Feedback, of course, will be given in your next lesson. But again, you can hand in through the following link for grading. It's free. It's free. Email sherlockjohn@gmail.com. You can always reach me through this particular link, and for any assistance and any guide that maybe you'd want to be enlightened through as your coursework is concerned. And again, it's for free. But again, feel free to hand in, and I would very much want to maybe see. Finally, good students, hand in your response. Feedback, of course, will be given in your next lesson. But again, you can hand in through the following link for grading. It's free. It's free. Email sherlockjohn@gmail.com. You can always reach me through this particular link, and for any assistance and any guide that maybe you'd want to be enlightened through as your coursework is concerned. And again, it's for free. But again, feel free to hand in, and I would